So, what do you do when the polls say you're on track to win, but your gut is telling you that you could lose it all? We're about to dive into a really high-stakes interview with South Australia's Premier Peter Malinauskas right before an election. He's facing some tough questions on, well, everything, from his integrity to the cost of living. This is his last chance to make his case, and you better believe every single word matters.
The interview kicks off with this really surprising quote from the founder of Intel, of all people: "Only the paranoid survive." Now, for a premier who's looking pretty good in the polls just days before an election, that is a fascinating choice. It tells you everything about his mindset. He doesn't see victory as a sure thing. He sees it as something that could vanish if he gets complacent. This isn't just some political line, it's a real peek into the mind of a leader during the most critical days of a campaign.
All right, so what are the key pressures really squeezing the premier in this election? To understand his answers, we've got to first understand the stakes.
And this, right here, gets to the core tension of his whole campaign. Yeah, the polls look good, but he knows people are genuinely unhappy about a lot of things. That frustration, that's the dangerous part. It's the unpredictable wild card that could just ignore all the polling and swing the entire election. It totally explains that whole paranoid mindset, doesn't it?
And a lot of that public frustration is coming from these big national issues. So how does the state premier handle problems like inflation and gas prices when, let's be honest, they're pretty much out of his control? This is a classic political test.
So here are the big frustrations: the housing crisis, insane fuel prices, energy bills that make you want to cry, and of course, inflation. These are the real kitchen table issues that actually decide elections. And even though they're technically national problems, they hit hard at home, and you can bet voters are going to hold their state leader accountable, whether that's fair or not.
His response to all this is honestly a masterclass in political framing. He draws a really sharp line in the sand. For problems like fuel prices, he basically points up to the federal government. But for housing, he leans right in, insisting the state has a huge role to play and, of course, highlights his own policies. It's a classic strategy, right? Own what you can fix and deflect what you can't.
But this is where the interviewer really presses him on a huge vulnerability. I mean, it's one thing to talk about national issues, but when your own state has the highest energy prices in the entire country, well, that's a problem that lands right on your doorstep. So what's his answer? Well, his defense is a two-pronged attack. He talks about green hydrogen as a gamble, a solution for the future, sure, but not for today's crazy prices. For the here and now, he pushes natural gas as the reliable fuel to get us through, and he points to a concrete action they've taken: the State Strategic Gas Reserve. So he's telling a story that tries to balance long-term vision with short-term practicality.
But policy is only ever half the battle, right? The interview then takes a really sharp turn, shifting away from the premier's decisions and focusing squarely on his character. Two major controversies come up that put his personal integrity directly on the line.
The first story is just an absolute political nightmare. A patient tragically dies in an ambulance, and then, in an almost unbelievable mistake, his health minister uses an email from someone with the same name to defend the system. It just compounded the family's grief. This is exactly the kind of crisis that tests a leader's core judgment.
So here's his response. He doesn't fire his minister. Instead, he frames it as a matter of accountability. He acknowledges the big mistake, but argues that the minister showed integrity by completely owning it, not blaming anyone else. He's basically making a bet that voters will value someone admitting they messed up more than they'll value a political scalp.
And just when you think it can't get any more dramatic, the interviewer uses that exact phrase to describe another incident, this one involving the premier himself. And you know what? The description fits. This is an absolutely extraordinary story.
Okay, let's just break this down, because it is cinematic. When he was opposition leader, he alleges a former colleague tried to blackmail him. So he goes to the police. And then, acting on their instructions, he wore a secret wire to record a conversation. I mean, come on. Even though charges were eventually dropped, the very idea of a political leader secretly recording someone, it's just explosive.
So how do you possibly defend an action that sounds like it's straight out of a spy novel? Well, he flips the script entirely. He frames it as the ultimate act of integrity. His argument is that he knew the political damage would be huge, but that his ethical duty had to come first. It's a super high-risk defense that asks voters to believe he chose principle over politics, even when it meant getting his hands dirty.
So after defending his record on policy and his character under fire, the interview gets to its final phase, the big pitch for the future. What is his ultimate vision for the state?
And then comes the question every successful state leader gets.
Is this job just a stop on the way to a bigger prize? Are his real ambitions in the nation's capital, Canberra?
His answer is definitive. He uses this powerful metaphor, South Australia as a piston that's firing, to paint himself as the engineer of the state's turnaround. And by declaring he has no interest in doing anything else, he's making a final, direct pitch of unwavering loyalty to the very voters he needs just days from now. So, the case has been made. He's presented himself as a pragmatic leader on policy and, well, a principled, if unconventional guy when it comes to integrity. Now it's up to the voters to decide which version of Peter Malinauskas they believe in, the steady hand at the wheel or the protagonist in a political thriller. Their answer is going to determine the future of the state.